Hi everybody, you're listening to the MoStopMo podcast. In this episode, I get to Zoom with the crew of MoStopMo's first produced short, The Cookie Cutter. Featuring our lead animators Zaldy Dingle, Fu Yang, Nia Zaini, and film editor Jordan Rose, we get to discuss the challenges of producing a successful clay-based stop-motion film, with the additional hurdles of changing studios, launching a film festival, and then adjusting to a global pandemic. So we've got quite a show lined up for you today. Now, The Cookie Cutter originally premiered at the end of November at our inaugural stop-motion film festival. And since then, we've received an outpouring of support and kind words, so I want to thank everyone for that. There's been many requests to also see our film again, as well as the festival. So I'm proud to announce we will be screening an encore presentation over Christmas weekend from Friday, December 25th through Sunday, December 27th. If you'd like to jump on any section of the festival and just click and see what you'd want to see in the fest, look at the description below the YouTube video, and each segment will have a time next to it. If you click on that time, it'll jump right to that segment. A couple other exciting announcements that MoStopMo has. We're going to be producing our documentary behind the scenes of creating The Cookie Cutter. The film is called Red-Handed, and you'll see why when you see the short. It'll be available soon on our MoStopMo YouTube channel, so keep your eye out for that. Lastly, this is a big announcement. I'm excited to announce that MoStopMo will be hitting the road. Starting in April of 2021, MoStopMo is going to be touring the United States of America to check out each state's stop-motion opportunities, whether it be their school, their studio, or just stop-motion artists who are independently producing stop-motion across the contiguous 48 states. Can't drive to Hawaii, and right now the borders are still shut down, so I can't quite get to Alaska. Now, this comes with a kind of a exciting thing too. We've just acquired our production machine, the MoStopMobile. So that's just the beginning of the planning. So if you are interested in partaking or being featured or just telling us about stop motion in your part of the world, as we're still in the planning stages, reach out. Email us at info@mostopmo.com and let us know where you are, and maybe we'll swing to your neck of the woods in the upcoming year. Now back to our podcast episode. It's of great pride that I am able to present to you this episode of the MoStopMo cast. It's not the full cast and crew, but it has our lead animators and also our lead editor. Other people couldn't make it, but I think we have a very good comprehensive look at what it's like to produce a film and how to stay on track when life is coming at you in all directions. This film, The Cookie Cutter, would not have been possible without hundreds of people. So this little sampling that is a part of this podcast is just an idea of what it takes to produce something like this. So I want to thank everyone who's been a part of producing The Cookie Cutter, and I do proudly present this MoStopMo podcast episode, the cast of The Cookie Cutter. One last thing. I want to shout out a special thanks to one of MoStopMo's fans, Will Samples, for providing our new signature sign-off. So at the end of our podcast, you're going to hear our sign-off thanks to Will. And without further ado, let's listen to this podcast of the MoStopMo cast that created The Cookie Cutter. All right. And hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hello.
I'm so happy to be reunited with the core MoStopMo production group here. I'm just going to do some brief introductions. We have Zaldy Dingle, we have Fu Yang, we have Nia Zaini, and Jordan Rose. This is the production and post-production representation of our film. We all had a role in creating the animation to a degree, or putting it together in post, whether it be editing or compositing. So let's just start doing a quick introduction to each of you guys, how you want to introduce yourselves. But before that, I just want to say congratulations to everybody. We did it. So giving
Yay!
ourselves a round of applause.
It was a long journey.
Yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm excited to kind of go into the journey and talk about what we've learned and what drove us crazy and what we loved. So let's do a quick introduction, and why don't we just start? Let's start alphabetically, I guess. Zaldy, why don't you go first?
Alphabetically.
Wait a minute.
By last name.
I like
I'm thinking credit wise. Yeah, it's like it was always Zaldy, Fu, Nia when it came to animation, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Zaldy Dingle. My let's see what my role was. So I'm the lead animator, or one of the lead animators for the cookie cutter. I also did quite a few of the fabrication for props, the bathtub prop, the treadmill, some of the furniture. I also took care of some of the rig removal and compositing with in the film, and a lot of cleanup, some digital touch-ups here and there when necessary. So yeah, that was basically my role in the film.
Okay. Fu? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Hi
No, I guess
everyone.
it would be Jordan.
Hi,
Yeah,
Jordan.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm Jordan Rose. I'm a video and sound editor. I joined MoStopMo as a video editor. And basically, my role is to take all this beautiful animation and all these frames and put them into one concise film.
Cool.
Nice. And now Fu?
Hi everyone, and I am Fu Yan. And I feel like being in MoStopMo, my role is like a chameleon. Is that the animal's name?
Yeah.
Chameleon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I learn a lot from the team. I am an animator. I do some fabrication. I also help with some podcast editing. Like it's really a lot of things. Really, everyone dedicates so much in this production, not only the film, but also like all the meeting, all the learning and practicing, and the festival, other events. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Nia?
Nia Zaini. I'm one of the animators and fabricator, and I think that's it. I build door too. I build the studio door.
That's right. Yeah, we'll get to like actually making the studio to animate when we switched from San Francisco to Oakland. Yeah, so you were a part of
She's
that.
also the illustrator.
All right.
Yes, the illustrator, yeah.
Let's not
Yeah.
let's not downplay your involvement here. I mean, that and the design of the cookie box, that was a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Well, it's funny because starting with Nia, it's just Nia has the ability to focus in on like the details that, and she cares so much about these little details, not only with the illustrations of the cookie box that was essential for, printing out these little cookie boxes, but even like the one thing, of course, that impressed us all were the patches.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like especially early on when we were first starting to put this thing together, we were just the first thing that we started was the bathroom. So I was just kind of more tunnel vision. Let's get this bathroom shot, and Zaldy was helping step up, and he started designing the tub, and then Jessica Galvin started working on, I think, the sink, and
Matthew.
yeah, oh yeah, Matt Guerrera, he helped with doing the walls. And it was Chloe who did the toilet, I think.
Yeah, was it?
Oh, no, not Chloe. I'm not. It was Elisa. It was Elisa who did the toilet.
Yeah.
Right. But so I was thinking about this bathroom, and at a certain point, Nia was like, "I'm gonna try sewing some tiny patches," because we were looking into patches and what that would look like. And she started in on these patches, and I was just amazed in that, like, she's got this. I don't know how to describe it. You have a very tiny style.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you have this ability to kind of create these cute and very, very Nia stylized small details that worked perfectly for the film that accented everything. So
They were like smaller than a dime.
y-
The size of the-
smaller than a, yeah, it was like I had a penny for reference, but it was definitely like smaller than a dime for sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, and like even before we were thinking about cutting it and putting it all together, just like putting that together, you like this core group of stop motion animators really helped kind of think beyond my tunnel vision of this bathroom shot to think of like the wider production. So Nia, how do you like tell us a little bit about like what brought you to want to start doing patches for this? That's kind of like one of the big things in this. It's one of the payoffs of the film. And just tell the viewers, there's going to be spoiler alerts in this if you haven't seen the short. So it probably pays to go and spend 8 or 9 minutes to see the short before watching this podcast. But Nia, again, so like the patches, what drove you or drew you to wanting to make these patches? Because that's quite the task.
I think because since before even we started on this project, I'm always liking to spend a long time working on tiny things. So I guess at the time, I think I just want to contribute something because Matt was doing all this 3D, Matt and Zaldy was doing all this 3D printing objects, and I felt like, what can I do? So, and I think at the time we didn't want the patch to be embroidered yet, but I thought it would be satisfying to give a little texture because I'm thinking we will have a like a close-up shot on it.
Well,
And when I asked you whether we should do it, I think I told you, should we try this? I don't know if I can do it, so I don't want any pressure on me at the time.
I remember,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And I was just kind of like, well, maybe we could order something or buy something. And I had been looking for a long time, and all the patches were going to be bigger than a penny, and it was not going to work with the scale for Rory and her sash. Um, so yeah, you tried it, and I remember you bringing it to one of our meetings,
Yeah.
and
I said, "Oh,
everyone was
mistake."
just kind of like blown away by these patches.
Yay.
And like I remember, and even when kind of jumping towards the end of the film, those patches really helped in the editing of putting this together. Jordan and I were walking back and forth, especially during the what I call the transaction scene. Zaldi worked really hard on a lot of the transaction scene in terms of the treasures coming through, but that all hinged on the discovery through the patches. So like taking those patches, getting a good enough shot, and then like Jordan cutting together those patches. We worked a little bit on like that for the timing and the humor, right?
I'd say that scene was the one we worked on the most.
Yeah,
Really nailing that one down was the one we worked on the most.
yeah, yeah, and like we I think we tried different cuts and different timings and different reactions.
Oh yeah, I have a whole timeline of I think 4 or 5 different sequences of just that one sequence or different tries of that one sequence.
Yeah. In terms of cutting the film, what I think we came down to you before I kind of at the very end was doing the final touches with Ricky for sound and everything like that. How many versions of this film existed in terms of project files? Do you like were we around 17 or 18
Yeah,
versions?
I think you're right on the dime with that. I think there's 17, 18 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think your last version that you cut, I was able to save it as the 19th version,
Okay.
and then that's where I was able to do picture lock and then send it over to sound with Ricky in Las Vegas. So tell me a little bit about your experience with editing this, Jordan.
It's something new for sure. I'm used to doing visual effects and 3D animation. So this was something a little different. With VFX and with live action, you usually don't have a storyboard. It's script or kind of by the word of mouth. For this one, you guys had an entire storyboard laid out for it, and a lot of the animation was done by the time I came on. So it was like having a puzzle and having the picture ready for you. And
Oh,
then
like,
kind of
like
just
referring to
piecing it
the image
together.
and then kind of
Yeah,
piecing
and then
it
kind of
together.
piecing it together. Yeah.
Okay. So that's different in that. So when you were working in something like, or historically when you've worked in VFX or just like CG
Mhm.
stuff, you don't necessarily have that information.
No, it's most likely a script, but the you don't have visual information usually. You have a lot of dialogue, or oh, character A goes over this scene or goes over something or does these actions. But that's different from the written and then seeing a storyboard where you visually get to see the actions. You can kind of have a different pacing to it.
Uh-huh. So I know you came in a little bit later because as we were going and putting this together, we were just kind of doing an assembly edit just to
Mhm.
kind of line up our scenes. Uh, when you jumped on, there was a little bit of a learning curve for the story. We had a lot of animatics, we had all these other
Yes.
things in the background and things that worked, and the things that didn't work. And I was like, oh, ignore this whole part, or this
Yeah.
is not going to be there. Uh, how was that to jump into a project where we were already kind of like putting things together?
Um, I was pretty comfortable with it. Most project I worked on, and you typically as an editor, you don't come in until later.
Hmm.
You're not there typically from start to finish. So I'm used to coming in about midway. You all were so super nice about it, very accommodating. I never at any point felt lost or confused. It was just like, it wasn't like I came in here like, all right, here's all this footage, have a good day. It was
Uh,
like, all right, let me explain things step by step by step, what we've done, what we're looking to do. And it was wonderful. It's really
yeah,
helpful.
and I have to credit that to people like definitely Fu and Zaldi because
Mhm.
um, maybe things that might have been done more on the editing and compositing side were already kind of worked out, especially Fu. Uh, we were having a little bit of a struggle in how to tell the beginning of this story. Now, Fu
Mhm.
has worn so many hats in this, like she said, you were not feeling very strong in fabrication, but then you ended up helping build the house, and you were doing a lot of hands-on animation, and especially in the beginning, where we had this opening that was going to be a news broadcast transitioning into the world of Steve. We did a lot of research on how we could effectively do that, not only with the animation, but the compositing, and then also our aspect ratio. We wanted to shoot it as a 16:9 field, and that was kind of causing layout issues with Steve watching television in a 4:3, like more or less like an now people might see it as an Instagram ratio where it's just like a block or a square. So Fu really took it upon herself not only to animate majority of that opening scene, if not all of it. I'm not sure if you animated all of it or majority of it. I think almost all of it.
All
I
of
mean,
it.
basically, until we get to Steve watching television, I got to say, I think that was all you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I need to have a very very big thanks to Nia, because at the very first she's helping me with like we choose the color for the anchor or for the bikini guys or girls. She
I,
helps a lot,
I
and
got so many like people talking about the bikinis.
yeah, and it was very fun that when we discussed with David later, and you even mentioned how about like have you seen someone wears something with a uh like yellow or green like neon kind of
So
stuff.
I was referring to the Borat, like Borat in the first movie, I think it was. I don't know if anyone's seen the Borat movie, but I was kind of saying there's a association with that neon kind of yellowish green that would read well, and even like subliminally, people would even laugh more because in the Borat movie, he's wearing like a mankini, um,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and just
so
that
so
scene alone,
David,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so David really like as the director, he really pushed the humor to the most. And yeah, I got Nia's help, and later on she's working on more fabrication, which she's really good at it. And so I try, it's like a challenge. I just have a lot of discussion with David about the first sequence, because there are so many things can explore, or we can even make it more richer in the info we want to tell to people in the beginning. So yeah, I'm quite obsessive. Like even
Good quality.
with the quality, like the globe spinning. I remember like I spent 3 days, like the first
Yeah, you
day.
shot that a few times. I remember.
Yeah, like every time David will give me new feedback, and he's very like just make me be better artist in general. So the first time he just suggests, how about we make the globe more 3D, like we will have some texture on the ocean and some mountains or something. So it's like one day after another, it's become more and more rich, and which is a nice thing, because when it comes to a bigger screen, it really look more delicate and more sophisticated of what we want to say, and more interesting to watch it, even though it's just a few seconds. And then Zaldy was helping, like he's always give me the file, which super easy to work with, and he already got Steve watching the television, that footage. So it was magical once I have the time to put his footage, what he's animated, into the TV sequence. It just looked very completed and feel nice.
Yeah, I was really impressed by how you guys would really just step up and make what not only just what was needed to tell the story, and I've experienced this in collaborations before, but not on this level. The drive and the attention to detail that you guys have had in terms of bringing your own attention to detail had elevated this project much higher than probably it was expected to be. So when we were first given this project from Studio 347, it was a story that, and just kind of in context, MoStopMo was working in relation to educational institutions to develop a stop motion short. So the development of this idea wasn't even necessarily our own, and there wasn't even a lot of wiggle room in the narrative. So when we were given this, we were like, what are we going to do to make this narrative pop? And I'd like to also get everyone's first impression of the narrative, because to be honest, it was a little like, oh, it ends pretty dark. And we'll come back to that, but I remember seeing your first composited scene and I was like, holy cow, we have something great here. And when we started showing that at Studio 347, everyone there was like, wow, this is going to be something. But it all kind of circled back to the original vision. The idea was to kind of make it a little bit rough around the edges. It's like almost like it's a way to stylistically camouflage the production value of a short like this. But the efforts that Zaldy did, because probably the very first prop that was built was this bathtub. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Zaldy is such an adept and meticulous sculptor and fabricator, not only on like the tactile manual level, but on the digital level. And I gotta say, between you and Matt initially, and then like even like that little floor we found which was Matt finding some fabric sample in that kind of hexagon floor tile, that already exceeded the visual development style that was going to be the original direction of the film.
Right. I think I would like to think that Matt and I sort of
set the tone.
We sort of ruined the initial vision of this film, sort of positively ruined it, because I remember that the original concept was that we were going to the clay puppets were going to stay the same, but all the backdrops were either going to be either flat illustrations or textured blocks, basically like physical textured blocks.
There was a thought of like just doing like almost like stage flat cut foam core and kind of doing a dimensionality of that to kind of create a little bit more of a stylistic look to a degree, and other things where it's just kind of be more like hand painted,
Yeah.
very basic shape things, and then
Yeah, and when I was given the task of, or I voluntarily took the task of taking on the bathtub, but there wasn't really any way to make sort of a simplistic, stylistic bathtub that
right.
Steve could actually fit in.
Especially the design that they gave you. I mean, there was a rounded clawfoot bathtub, and how do you pull that off? And you just ran with it.
Yeah, and so that one was created with a combination. It was really a multimedia, like encompassing multimedia piece of fabrication, because it was initially it was illustrated. They gave us an illustration of the actual tub. I took it and I created a model, a 3D model of it. I took the 3D model, I printed the tub part, or not printed, but I created the tub part in paper, and then I plastered over that and created the actual physical tub. And the claw feet, I modeled those in 3D and 3D printed them. So it was a combination of, it was an illustration, then a 3D model, then an actual plaster piece that was sculpted to a 3D printed feet, to finally getting it painted and stuff. And yeah, that along.
And don't
with
gloss over the
that,
painting either. I mean, you had to epoxy that to smooth it out, and then you also had to kind of create the glaze with, I don't know if you actually used appliance paint or if you used...
I used automotive clear coat.
Yeah, which ended up being like a good thing, especially because of the clay and how it stained.
Right, and that's, I think that's our props were pretty much the first thing that set the tone for this film, with all of Matt's finds, and also Alyssa and Jessica's other, like with the sink and the toilet and just all of those things. When we finally put that first scene together, then I think that's when we finally figured out what the tone of this movie was going to be and what the look of this movie was going to be. And then the second thing that sort of set the tone, sorry if I'm jumping around a little bit, but the second thing that set the tone was Nia and Fu's animation. Their first animation, the opening credit animation was one of the first ones done.
That's right.
The bathtub animation, actually, that was the very first one done, right? Was the bathtub animation?
Bathtub, yes.
I think it was that simple. We did the close up and then the wide shot, or one or the other in that order. Yeah.
The finger twitch.
Yeah, the finger twitch, the rubber duck and the finger twitch. That was the first one done. The opening credits, which once we saw the opening credits, it was like, okay, this is the direction we're headed. This is how we're going to animate it. It's no longer going to be this sort of rough stylized animation. It was going to be like on ones, really smooth sort of things.
Yeah. It was almost a little bit of a wrench in the production philosophy of the film. So originally, Michael Parks was the original director of the film. And once that bathroom was assembled, that idea, and I forget the reference he gave, but Michael Parks, if people aren't aware, he did a lot of animation for Robot Chicken. He's got wonderful tutorials out on YouTube. He's just a great stop motion animator. It's just, that's who he is. Very sweet man. Very, I love his sense of humor. And it's funny because this film started in San Francisco at 347, and then at a certain point, there was a disassociation with the project. So I was able to say, well, then why don't we just, instead of like making this, just ending the project, ending the experience, who's interested to continue with it? So 347 gave me and MoStopMo the IP, if you will. And we decided to go with this and continue production. And then it was at that point that Michael wasn't able to continue with us because of time and everything. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot of logistics. He was in San Francisco and he lived in another part in the East Bay. And between that and having kids and moving, all these things that were happening. And this was around last November, honestly. And I mean, November, December, we were trying to like reestablish our studio where Nia built the doors, and I had to actually build out my studio space to accommodate the next shots. Michael wasn't able to continue with us. But I don't know if you guys got the email that he sent along. Did I read that to you guys, or did I share it with you?
Yeah.
He was saying, originally when we had the story, we were going to just kind of soft play the darkness of it. And he's like, and once it transferred over to MoStopMo studio in Oakland, he was like, he said in the email, it's like, you guys just dove into it head first. And he's like, well done. And I could tell like he was also kind of feeling, let's go with it. But maybe there was just the vision that was in 347 and in San Francisco wasn't going to serve the film the best. Kind of like the design necessarily wasn't going to serve the film the best. And this is what I really, again, appreciate about the collaborative project, is that the people working on this, it was a learning process for everybody. This is, for a lot of the people who worked on this film, it was their first collaborative stop motion film to have worked on outside of their educational environment. So I love that it was kind of more community driven. Like, we want this to be something that we can be proud of and show our best talents. And you guys really did that. And even on the back end, after, when you change from one studio to another, there could be maybe like sour grapes about who's owning the film, who's got a certain credit. But I've been getting such positive feedback from Ray Gilberti, who we met at, I met Ray while I was running the stop motion department at the Academy of Art University, who's had since become a juror for the MoStopMo Fest. And wonderful words from him, got great words from Michael Parks, got a really nice message from Tom Santamand. Do you know who he is? He is like a legendary stop motion armature fabricator, and then he transitioned to CG. And he was like, "Thank you very much. This film is beautiful. Thanks for keeping stop motion alive." So there's some really nice compliments coming in because of you guys and your collaborative efforts and bringing this to a level that probably couldn't have existed through one person. So that's my long way of saying you guys kicked ass on this film.
Thank you.
So we did the bathroom scene, and we did the opening credits scenes, and then even the end credit scene where Steve is doing that crawl.
Yes, that was done right after right after that credit, the intro scene.
Yeah. I wanted to speak a little bit more about the compositing and editing, because we definitely had some nice footage, but we definitely needed to clean it up. So again, like, Fu, when you were putting all this together, what kind of experience did you have in compositing? I know with your film Telltale, you had many different styles that you had to marry and make look seamless in your film. So that was kind of that was helpful, because the very first real composited scene in this film was probably that news sequence. It was either the news sequence or the bedroom sneaking sequence. I'm not sure which one was first. When Rory is sneaking into the house?
Yeah. I think maybe the news come later. Is it, Nia?
I don't remember which one came first. Do you guys remember?
No, the bedroom scene came first.
Okay.
The news sequence, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, because the bedroom scene came right after the bathroom scene. We tore down the bathroom scene and started building and we built the bedroom.
I want to say that when I came on, the sneaking scene was done, and you guys were in process of animating the news sequence.
Okay.
So I think the news sequence came after.
All right.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
And just kind of speaking to that, let's jump to that then, the bedroom sneaking scene, because that was probably one of the first inserts into our animatic that we were able to kind of really not only see the animation timed out as well, but also we were able to get Brendan Walsh to
Yeah.
do some beautiful sound design and adding a little bit of music there for what would end up being kind of leading up right to the climax of the film.
Yeah.
So Jordan, when you're given a film and it like you have a scene that's already put together, are you kind of like, oh, this is interesting that this is already done, or like is that an uncommon thing for you so far in your editing experiences, or?
To have a whole sequence done like that, yeah, it's a little uncommon. To have maybe 2 or 3 shots put together real quickly or roughly, just so the animators know what it looks like and they can either backtrack to fix things or they can continue forward is not uncommon. But yeah, to have you guys have that whole sequence done out was it's a little bit of a shocker, but it was surprisingly like it was happy.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, look at how much you guys have done. This is amazing. I get like this little peek into your guys' world.
Well, it was so nice, I think, having your fresh eyes come to the project because working on a project like this, especially as long as this thing took, because how it changed hands so many times and how many obstacles
Yeah.
there were in completing it. Whenever you had fresh eyes come to this project, whether it was Brendan coming in or when it was you coming in, Jordan, or even towards the end when Ricky came in, I felt like it reaffirmed that we had a good project and a good film. And the comments that were heard along the way from people coming in really were speaking towards the efforts put in by, the core team who were fabricating and animating.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the
Well,
bed.
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, can I comment on that? Because I think initially, before Jordan came in, we didn't have an editor. So
We
we were
didn't.
actually trying to sort of put the film together ourselves without an editor to see if we could, just for the sake of time. But I
And
think
necessity. Yeah.
and necessity because the availability of edit it was actually surprisingly hard to find an editor that was willing to sort of commit the time to on this film or ones that weren't busy doing other projects. So we lucked out that Jordan actually came on board. But I think
Definitely.
as we started putting the film together, as we started completing scenes and cleaning up scenes and starting to put the scenes together, I think there's, especially with a project that took this long, you become sort of attached to it and you can't detach yourself to it and look at the film objectively. And I
Right.
think we felt that a lot towards the end of the film and looking at the end of the film.
Hmm.
Because I don't think I saw a version past version probably 12 or 13.
Yeah, that was like
And
shortly after you had done all the compositing for the final transaction. I think
exactly.
that was. I mean, you were pretty much. I think
I,
I don't want to speak for you, but I could tell you. I think you were just done. You were mentally like, I'm done.
yeah, because that scene took that scene took a lot out of me. It was a very challenging scene,
Yeah.
and the thought of like having to piece that together and edit it in any way that made any sense was yeah. I was at that
Well, the
point.
one thing
I needed like a few weeks off of it if I actually needed to.
Little
I-
If I actually
tiny
wanted to
vacation.
continue. But
Yeah.
it was but for what I saw of the finished film up to that point was completely, especially towards the end, was completely different than what the finished film was, because the finished film, the pacing of the end was to me unexpected. It was beautifully done. The timing was there, because initially that ending scene was that just one fixed shot, and it was just sort of long and drawn out. And when you took a look at it, just looking at it objectively, it was too long, and it was
Yep.
into that process.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was something that we didn't plan on because the original.
We followed the animatic.
Yeah, when we took a look at the animatic and the pacing of the animatic, it made sense. But once you actually animated it and got the timing all into place, and then you took a look at it and you're like, you know what? This scene is kind of boring.
Well, we had painted ourselves into that corner. Like I have a 2 shot, and base and the payoff is going to be happening through this entire. I don't know how long the shot is. I don't know if Jordan, you remember how long that shot is with going back and forth between Rory and Steve. I mean,
was
that must
almost-
be a
It
couple
was
minutes.
almost a minute. It was probably, I think it was a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
that's a long time to spend on one shot for a
Yep.
minute
Yeah.
and a half. And looking at it, I was just I looked at it in dread after it was done, because Nia and I did quite a bit of the animation on that, and just thinking that this shot that we worked so hard on was not paying off just made me a little.
So why did you feel like it wasn't paying off? I'm interested in that.
Because of the length. The quality of the animation was, I think, there.
Yeah.
Astounding, yeah.
The editing was there, but just because it was a minute and a half worth of that one static shot was I don't think that read as well as we wanted it to read. But what Jordan did with the editing, with being able to jump back and forth between Rory and then the patches, and then some of the treasures, and then back to Steve, and just that whole making it sort of that whole chaotic, frantic feel was that was to me surprise. To me, it was the best surprise, and it was it alleviated a lot of the concerns that I had about the ending. So great work, Jordan. In short,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I gotta say, and especially giving some kudos to Ricky with sound design. Ricky really kind of did a lot of the sound design for the later part of the film, definitely.
Yeah.
What I agree with you, Zaldy. I felt like it was a long shot, but it was a beautiful shot. And the thing is, I felt like it worked well. And this is where the editing came in. And then you even timing out the animation. And you guys were crossing over in terms of timing of these scenes out. And I remember there was a lot of back and forth, and you rolled with it, but I could tell it was just like, I'm not going to be able to do anything else with this at a certain point. And I was like, okay, I pushed it as far as I could go. And honestly, you brought it further than I expected. The stuff that you were able to do and accenting, compositing, and editing and timing, so the viewer can actually look over at Steve and then look at Rory and have enough time to look back and forth, and keeping that one shot, we're letting the viewer be the editor now. They are looking at the entire frame, and almost like theater, they're deciding where's the humor being found. And I would love to get one of these surveys of people watching the film and watching their eyes go back and forth and see how many their eyes are just
like the trackers.
Exactly. But yeah, so like by the time we got to the patch shot, this is rare for me to work on either a staged production or a screen production. And I laugh out loud. I don't laugh out loud often in terms of like watching something, but when it came down to that patches sequence, after especially we go to the patches and then we go to that long sequence, I felt like it was a nice balance. That shot being longer was a nice thing to spend some time with after the quick dum 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 dum. Yeah. I was definitely pleased with that. I'm interested in hearing, we could keep talking about the film and the details, but I'm interested in hearing everyone's perspective on this process of making this film. And also just, we could speak a little bit about the fest if you're interested in it, but honestly, this was primarily focused to be a film on its own. And then I kind of ran with it. And, before COVID, we were going to have a gallery show and an opening. And I booked a theater in Oakland, the new Parkway Theater. And we held on to that theater until last August. And we knew that nothing was going to happen in person for a long time. But you guys were only on board for a film. I decided I was going to make this a festival and make it, and it became an international festival to feature our film. But I'm interested in hearing your guys' perspective on this process, especially like changing studios and the extra efforts that went into this. So, like again, Nia, we had to go to Oakland and build a studio in my. I have a shared studio space in Oakland. We had to build a studio to shoot some of the remaining scenes of the film. And Nia would show up, and Nia's got some good fabrication skills, so she helped build these doors that would roughly slide open and close. That our studio would barely fit. It was a 8 by 10 space.
Even less maybe with all the props that we have in there.
With the props, and not only the props but the camera and the lighting, and then we got to fit an animator in there somehow. We need the computer, you know. You all kind of rallied to help make that happen. This became probably a little bit more than you bargained for when you started.
But I think all the struggles is that makes it like we have something to talk about now, something to remember by, because all the hardship is what makes me like it even more. A lot of things happened. Like during shooting one scene, I think me and Fu was in the studio, and we have our backs against the wall, and we really have this much space, just enough for our stomach too.
You're just kind of just getting out of the shot.
Yeah, so and with limited space to even move around our hands, and we were in the studio for maybe 3 hours, and then after that brings us a lot closer, I guess. And then
It's like being in war together.
yeah, and also there's one time where Zaldy has to animate, but he couldn't reach the button, so I was just there just to press the capture. And
Yeah, that was probably for that outdoor scene, right? You like Zaldi, you and was it you?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, for the outdoors, for all of the outdoor scenes. So I basically had to wedge myself into a corner of the studio, and yeah, I couldn't reach the button to click the picture, and if I did, I would have knocked something over, or the potential for me for knocking something over was really, really high, because I think initially I attempted to do it myself, but that was physically demanding. So
Right.
you had your back hurt for a while.
yeah, it did.
Yeah, you were talking about you're like having like neck and shoulder issues. You're like, I'm gonna have to work
Yeah.
this out for a week or so.
Well, I think that was the shot that Nia and I we we sort of went back and forth on who animated what, because there were some scenes where I just couldn't physically finish it, just because of how wedged I was in there, and how sore I was. So it was like, Nia, can you please animate Rory? I can't animate Rory.
Yeah, that was funny. Well, it's interesting. It's like we can laugh about it now, because I will arguably say that the festival and the screening went very well. I'm actually going to plan an encore presentation around the holiday break, so people can tune in one more time before we really shop it around to festivals. But again, kind of circling back into you guys being in this thing where maybe it became a little bit bigger than what you might have thought. Um, how do you manage your expectations and reinvest? Now, as an example, Fu not only was doing, animation for the film, but she also started taking some animation and curtailing it for promoting the festival. She also did some podcast. She did a podcast interview with Medina Papel, a film she also worked on within this time frame that you also did their podcast, and they're featured in our 2020 festival. Like, talk a little bit about how do you keep not only professional but keep your spirits up during this process? Is it
Definitely,
possible? Go ahead.
it's definitely because of the people, and MoStopMo definitely every time as I see. A lot of time we animate. I usually David and Nia is there, Zaldy is there at the shooting day. It's already charged up. Like it's nice to see them, and also like in the very beginning, it's the story, the dark story, made me want to join in this production. And then David also mentioned about the podcast and those things. Those are the work I already want to get involved to. I want to assist, or I want to see this community to grow bigger. So a lot of things make it happen or more energized is because it is a community and everyone really helping each other to achieve it. It's never will be done by just one person. So yeah, everyone is in it and everyone is the fuel to make it happen. So that, yeah, that's why I can keep going, even though like we moved a different studio or yeah, different places or the goal, but it's always the people made me want to stay and to finish the work together.
I think for me, it was. So I think it would have been easy to jump off of the film the first month or two of production when we didn't know exactly what we were doing.
So maybe around, you're talking about December.
No. I would.
Oh, you're talking about the initial when we first
Yeah,
got.
yeah, when we first got the film.
Got it.
But I
Okay.
think once we completed that first scene, the bathroom scene, and when you took a look at the work that we put into it, and not just the volume of work, but the quality of work, I think it would have been a shame if we had not finished it and nobody had seen any of it, because or if the work just existed as a gallery piece
Right.
for display. I think there's nothing worse than seeing a gallery piece of stop motion work that has never been produced, because then you don't see it come to life. It's just these objects. But I think seeing the work and the quality of work and what we had accomplished, I think that motivated me to want to finish it and to want people to see the work that we put into it, because I think it just speaks to the people that put commitment and they poured their talent into it, and yeah, to not have it finished I think would have been tragic. And that's what motivated me, was to just want to finish it and to present it to the world.
Yeah. So then what would you guys consider was the most difficult part of this whole journey?
I would think it was the studio move.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, like, this can happen. This has been my first experience where an entire studio is giving the idea away or deciding not to produce it. And when that came about, I kind of saw it coming down the pipe, and I think I even said to you guys, there might be a time where this is not going to go any further because of either, whatever the reasons may be. I could tell the people who had given the idea to us, they were just kind of backseating it, that's the best I'll say. And I kind of let you guys know, just be ready, because when this happens, which I feel like it's going to happen, I'm going to make sure we get this and we go over. And actually, even lining up the theater and the gallery spoke to, it was kind of like a chess piece for us to say, you can't just shut it down. And the other thing is, traditionally, this might have been in a production environment that the producers who had put all the money into this and the effort into this and the studio space into it would be able to make a call like that. But this became so much of almost like a grassroots, self-funded project. Something that, we call it MoStopMo, but to be honest, it's like we've been all putting our own finances into this and our own efforts. Zaldy, you were kind of even saying as a project, you're like, this is my full-time gig right now. This is what I'm diving into and making sure like this works. You guys all put in so much time and effort into this film. switching over to another studio definitely was an obstacle. We had to literally build a space. We had to figure out what our next moves were, and this was all pre-COVID.
Right. Right. I think that was just because I think when we originally started this film, we already had a routine down. We had schedules down. We had people that we could turn to at the previous studio.
Yeah.
And to have that sort of upended and to have them abandon it and then have us need to move the production and then to have those things sort of disappear on us was that was disheartening at first, but I think in the end being able to have a lot more creative control over this project I think was necessary and it just worked out.
Yeah, so when we left 347, we lost our director, Michael Parks. We lost our who was pretty much our art coordinator and one of our main producers, Gil Banducci. We also lost consultants who were kind of looking at this along the way, like Benita DiCarlo or Tom Proust. These were people that were going to no longer be resources for us, at least in the immediate. With it, as simple as a logistic of being in the same space as these people was a gift. And then we switched over. The space was cold. It was small, especially because we decided, and this was before I was going to Chicago in December, like around the holidays, getting the space built, getting everything lined up, and then kind of giving you guys literally the keys to the studio to work while I was gone. I ended up stepping up as the director, even though in terms of the director, you guys each directed your own scene. We talked about it and you guys did wonderful jobs. I just kind of like laced it all together, to be honest. But there was a part where I was like, here are the keys. You guys take it. And that was kind of, I would imagine that might have been even more daunting because we were so like unstructured at a certain point.
Right.
I know like Nia had to commute from San Francisco, because everyone else, Jordan has the benefit of being able to kind of do things remotely, but Zaldy had to commute from like Union City or Fremont.
Yeah.
Foos in Berkeley, pretty much.
Which is closer, more closer than other team members.
Yeah, but I mean that all kind of like factored in because we had to figure out, where our studio is located off of Telegraph and 25th in Oakland, and not necessarily the safest feeling place to be. And especially if you're going to be working long hours or even finding parking, which might have been more of a thing. Like the just the logistics of that change kind of takes its toll.
Right. But we managed, I think fortunately we had quite a bit of the animation done prior to moving. I think we only had I'd say 2 or 3 shots left.
You guys were working on the animation of the outdoor transaction.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the first meeting, where Rory and Steve first met. Yeah, there was only the outdoor shots left to do. So fortunately, there was that. So I think we lucked out that we had quite a few of the shots already done. So
Right.
That was a little bit of a saving grace. And because we only had a handful of shots left to do, we were actually able to finish most of the shot. I think the only shot that we didn't finish was that final shot that you ended up animating because
Which the tracking shot, the
no,
hill.
the pure shot.
Oh, the
Mirror?
bathroom. Yeah, that's right. Because the
bathroom
hill
mirror.
shot wasn't even a part of it until I decided to get a little bit more obsessive. But anyway,
Because I don't think we wrapped up. I think we wrapped up the final shot I think it was like a week. I would say like a week before the COVID lockdowns happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to check my files to see what the date on
I kind of
final
felt like it
shot.
was around March 13th or something.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was that week that we uh, probably that week or the week before that we finally finished the shot. So we kind of lucked out that way.
I think first Friday was the last time we shot something.
Oh, that's yeah. There was so the first Friday of it was probably in March, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that date, what day that is. But you're right, because that's when Nia and we had finished the exterior
April.
for the house,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
while that was happening, I decided I was fortunate enough in one of our podcasts we interview Brett Foxwell, and he's an amazing animator, and he's also a motion control cinematographer for his films. He's got some beautiful camera movements. So in interviewing him, at a certain point, he said, "If you ever want to do some motion control stuff," I was like, "Yes, please." So then it became this thing of like, let's go back to the available fabricators here and see who wants to build this design that was a part of the original concept. Steve lived, and just I don't know if I've mentioned it here, but this film was originally called Steve's Kidneys. We decided to change that because I think if you do look up the term Steve's Kidneys, it's a Kickstarter campaign for a guy trying to raise money for a kidney transplant.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things about this film that were obstacles, and so that's where the rally to change the name of the film was really kind of coming about. I don't know if I ever said that initially when we had it at the Studio
No.
347, but if you Google Steve's Kidneys, that's going to be the first thing that pops up. So I didn't want to do that, but I digress. So when we were, when I interviewed Brett, we you were working compositing that and cleaning up all of that final transaction scene,
Yeah.
and Nia and she, I think, were also like, we decided we were going to build this hill, this neighborhood where Steve lived. It was this beautiful design, and I was like, oh, it's such a shame that that can't be in the film. I keep on saying to myself, and I know you guys are all like, let's just get this done, let's just get this done, and I'm like, Nia, what are the chances we can start building a hill to create this shot for a motion capture shot? If we could have or a motion control shot, if we could have a motion control shot in this film, that would be amazing. And Nia is just kind of like, okay.
Who was there to
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like I think Fu was there too, and then that's when you started working Fu on Medina Papel, right?
Yeah, I started to working on that. So Nia is sticking to the heel shot, like the additional thing. And big shout out to Angie, who's helping with the heel making, and she has so many enthusiastic. She's very enthusiastic and very easy.
Wonderful
to work
energy,
with.
yeah.
Yeah, and she also like help us like for one Steve's close-up shot for the expression. She made such a huge Steve for us. Like she's pay so attention to how do we do it and asking questions and help us with that what we need. So big shout out to Angie.
Yeah, definitely. She helped. She was integral in building the original structure for the hill and putting that together. But yeah, what we call the cookie eyes that Zaldy ended up cleaning up later. Yeah, we built, or I gave the supplies. I'm like, here are 4 blocks of red clay, and here's some foam so you could build it up. And she built this. It's a life-size Steve, just to create those cookie eyes. You know, because we had big domes that we painted. But going back to the motion control shot, so then it ended up becoming, I don't know, like, was it both Nia, you, and Fu and Anchi? Was that like you 3 were heading up that one?
Motion control, I think it's you, David, and Nia, and Brex. 3, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, well Brett, yeah, he came in and he gave us the camera after we had set everything up, definitely. Or he gave us the rig and he showed us how to do it. But it was like it was right. That's Nia. There was that first Friday and the studio space in Oakland where I have my space. There is they do a first Friday event, and it used to be a huge deal before COVID, but it was like that was that weekend where we're like, let's just get this shot done. We got to get it done. And I think by the time we set it up, Nia, you were shooting in there during an event in the studio where people were walking in and out and asking questions.
Yeah.
And
So every maybe 15 seconds, people were opening the curtain and what?
yeah, yeah.
Another one goes, okay.
I kept on bothering you because I was like trying to promote the film as well. I was like, Nia, is it okay for them to look? And you're like, yeah, they could look. And you were like animate. You created this tiny Rory with the tiny props in this wagon. Honestly, the thing was like this big, so
Yeah,
it could go
you
through
made
that.
the wagon though with a like Altoids box, tin
That's
box.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
made the wagon out of an Altoids box. You're right, and like some pins that I sawed off for the wheels, and yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But like, yeah, you were shooting while there was a live gallery event and people were drinking and talking and
Yeah.
bumping into things.
And some of them want to barge in too. They thought they could just walk in. So it was
Yeah, I kept on saying it's like you can't go further than this, and they're like, oh, and they're trying to get their head in there. I'm sure it's like I appreciate you being flexible during that process.
I think the shot could have been better.
I mean, well, I agree, but I think I mean I think it's beautiful. I think it's perfect. The vision I had for that last shot was very much like uh, the opening or closing sequence to Mister Rogers. You
Yeah.
know, if you I grew up with Mister Rogers' Neighborhood. We share a birthday, and that opening shot was always kind of like this fun little. This is our toy that we played with
Mm.
environment. So the idea of that shot looking more like a scale model was what I wanted it to look like. Whether it worked in the film is another thing, but in terms of the animation and the design of the hill and everything, I felt like I really liked it. Actually, we did a few takes and there was one shot that became a little bit more intentional, focusing on the different houses that I worked on a long time, and I decided at the very last minute I was like, screw it, I like it. I like the other shot.
That process was really painful because I think after Brett set up the camera and then he taught us a little bit how to control the camera, and he was like super, you do this and then we see all this graph going super fast, and then we thought Brett say, do you think you get it? And I say, yeah. And then after he left, we tried to set it up, and then the camera was has moment on its own.
Right.
And I think David at that day he stayed. I stayed there until midnight, I think, and then you stayed even longer. I think until the next morning. I came back and you were still there. I don't know whether you slept or.
Yeah, I spent the night working on it because I was just like, I got to get this off my plate. It's just too much. And I think there was like 5 or 6 takes
More
of
than
that final hill
okay.
motion control shot. Because yeah, you're right. It was like a little bit fidgety. I wanted it to end at that archway and start at Steve's house, and whatever would happen. I think I angled it a little too much, and the camera would either slip once in a while, so it just didn't look right. But every time I was just like, Nia, can you animate this ending part one more time?
Yeah, it was,
I think at that point too, we were the COVID lockdowns were still new. We didn't know how long we were locked down for.
Right.
I think we pushed the premiere of the film and also the festival to June or July because we thought we would be in the clear by then. So there was this like frantic feeling of needing to complete the film because we thought that we only had like maybe a month or two to hand it off to Jordan to edit. Could you imagine, Jordan, if you had to edit this in like a month?
Yeah.
So there was that frantic feel of wanting to finish the film, but
There was a lot of pressure.
I think it's sort of a blessing in disguise almost that COVID happened and gave us a lot more time to finish the film out, because I think had we rushed the finish of the film, I don't think it would have been as especially the ending wouldn't have been as good as it finally ended up being.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a blessing to hear that you have more time on a project, but it's also a mixed blessing because it's like, well, where do we decide that, we're striving for perfection, but we're living with acceptable in some cases. And I'm sometimes of the sort of like, well, why don't we try this now? And why we got a little extra time? Why don't we put in this motion control shot? Or I remember when I was talking to Jordan one day, I was thinking about doing an animated credit sequence with Nia's box design. And I think I'm not sure who was on the meeting, but I had mentioned it. And my problem is if one person says do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And Jordan was that one person. She's like, totally, you got to do it.
You
Now
were
that we
like,
do
yeah,
that,
we flip the box, and I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. It'd be like the motion graphic endings and like the stylized credit sequences. I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. I think Ricky was there with us as well.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, and it was just like, oh, do it. And you're like, uh-oh, I gotta do it now.
yeah. That I was like, oh, what did I get myself into? Because that definitely wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, and that it is.
Well, you lucked out I wasn't on that meeting, because I would have been like, no.
I know.
No.
I think at that point it was like even the meetings were too much for a lot of people. It was like, yeah, we're done. We gotta like move on with our lives.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
so-
definitely love the credit.
Yeah,
That's
well,
super
yeah.
worth it. I love it.
That took me by surprise. My
Yeah.
first reaction was, who animated the credits? That was cool.
Where did this come from?
And it's also stop motion, right? It's not really because you
Yeah, I
open
mean-
the box in the end.
So
It's a real
here
box.
is
Yeah.
Nia's box in life size, and I had decided at some point it would be great to kind of make it look like a giant cookie box, so I made a giant cookie box. And it's got all the credits here, and that's just that basic front we see throughout the film. Here is
Yeah, love it. It's really love it.
we got the back credits that took a while to try to fit everybody into this, and then
Beautiful though.
that final part here.
Yeah.
I have a question, David.
Yes.
When things finally open back up and people can go out and visit galleries,
Yeah.
do we want, or can we find a space to put all the props that we've made and have a gallery piece? Just
I would
a
love
ratio of the props that we've made for this film, because
Yeah.
when you look at it on film, it's hard to appreciate sort of the size and the scale and the quality of the pieces that we built for this piece. And I think it would be neat to put that on display and have people.
Yeah, I know when I was first shown the film and everything like that, I had thought that Steve was like
Yeah.
like
Uh-huh.
like the size of my finger maybe, or a little bit. No, he's like he's huge.
Yeah.
He's almost he's got to be 10, 12 inches tall.
I think he's like around 7 or 8.
7 or 8. I
Yeah.
know there's a big one of him too, like a bust of him. And
Yeah.
I was just
There's a
I was
life-size
taken
bust, like
aback by
literally
that.
life-size. But yeah, right.
Yeah.
Originally, Steve was 3 pounds of clay.
Oh god.
Now, now I had to build an armature
Yeah.
Yeah.
to hold him, or rebuild the armature, because the original armature just had way too much clay on it.
I mean, this is like you're speaking specifically now almost to that the treadmill that you had to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That for that scene. So it was like I can't. How am I going to suspend 3 pounds of clay up in the air? So I had to rebuild the armature so that I had like specific points where I could attach a rig to enable to just suspend him up in the air. I think I was able to trim him down to 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds maybe of clay, but still he was a heavy dude.
Yeah.
And I had to build a really, really heavy duty rig just to get him suspended, because we didn't have anything to hold him up that wouldn't collapse under the weight of Steve. And even the rig that I built strained to keep him up in the air.
You know, it's funny because I remember in the early meetings of MoStopMo, I don't know if you guys recall, there was a guy named Josh Mahan who decided to sit in with one of our early um, pre-production meetings of how we were supposed to execute the film. So Josh was a stop motion animator and producer that I met in New York probably a year prior on a holiday trip. I decided to check out a studio in New York called MoStopMo Studios, ironically really close to MoStopMo.
Yeah.
And when I went there, I talked to a guy there named Matt who was running the studio, but he talked to me. He's like, "Oh, my friend and colleague Josh is moving to the Bay Area." So I invited him to one of our earlier production meetings. And when looking at all of our designs and everything, and I think we had already built but not animated the bathroom scene, he was saying, well, you know, how are you thinking you're going to design this? And I said, well, the common language, because this was originally designed as an educational tool for different skill levels, was to create this out of clay. And he just was like, clay? He's like, that's going to be heavy and it's going to be hard to deal with. And it's red and it's oil based. He's just like, that's kind of, he's like, and I remember we decided at that meeting, and there was this kind of part where he's just like, I can't help you guys any further. He was, I think that was the last meeting he came to. He came, I mean, great guy. He ended up going to House Special and working with Leica and everything like that up in Portland. So I definitely need to follow up with him now that this is said and done. But yeah, figuring out not only the weight of a clay character, but an oil-based clay character with red, where our fingers, just handling this character, were leaving stains everywhere. If you look, I don't like to tell people these little Easter eggs, but if you look closely at the film, you're going to see a lot more red staining in areas that you might not have noticed. Maybe on the hardwood floors or around the tub or something like that. There are areas where you see literally the handprint of the animator. But like, yeah, dealing with a clay character, what was that like? Other, you know, I remember like I think one of the first real dynamic animations of Steve, probably the only dynamic one, is that treadmill scene where he has to be airborne. You had to make what started off as 3 pounds of clay airborne.
Yeah. That was challenging. Well, like I said, I had to build a custom rig to get him suspended up in the air. The rig was made out of wood, and,
Yeah.
and some pretty heavy the threaded rods. That was challenging because, like you said, the red got on everything. I like to wear hats, and I ruined a couple of hats with the red clay because it would get hot in the studio underneath all the lights, and I would need to take my hat off, and well, I had clay on my hands, and
I think we got some photos of your hats that have been ruined. I mean,
yeah,
there's going to be a documentary of this whole process, and definitely the stains throughout are a feature of that documentary.
I think fortunately I was able to clean up a majority of the stains in a lot of the shots.
Definitely.
I do have unedited versions of the shots where you could definitely see where all the red stains are
Yeah.
because it was everywhere. That was the biggest nightmare to work with. And it definitely slowed down the production because every time you posed Steve, you would have to wash your hands or you would have to wipe your hands down. We used baby oil to
Went through a fair amount of baby oil and wipes.
Yeah, baby oil and baby wipes to remove most of a good amount. I wouldn't say most, but a good amount of the clay off of your hands before you could redo a shot. And yeah, the process was interesting to say the least. It was, looking back on it, it was actually pretty fun, but
I remember one point you said, I don't think I'm ever going to do a clay character again.
but you know what? I think learning what I did with this production, I would probably actually do it again.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty satisfying.
Yeah, what did you guys think, Fu, Nia? I mean, you guys, especially like Fu, you were doing that whole opening sequence, and you were doing most of that opening sequence outside of the globe. I mean, everything in this universe was going to be clay. The globe was clay. All the characters were clay outside of the fabricated sets. You were using a downshooter, so you didn't have the same obstacle as Zaldi of trying to like redesign a character from scratch and taking pounds literally off of the character. You were, doing a downshooter where the camera is pointing down, so gravity isn't necessarily an issue. How did you feel that worked out for you with kind of putting together that whole opening news sequence with our broadcaster, our bikini characters?
Yeah, the clay is, even though yeah I have less issue with the rigging part, but yeah, the clay is so easy to get dirty. Like when the characters, I have a green one, I have an orange one, and sometimes I animate the green will go to the orange or something. So it's a post production. I need to clean them up, and especially for the eyeball, the white part, we all need to make it consistently clean. So yeah, the very rough image, it's usually very clean clay, and when it goes through to the end of the frame, the clay is actually got pretty dirty and like grayish, something very gross like. So the post production for the clay, this material definitely need to spend time to make it consistent and clean. But the feeling of to touch the clay, I'm really enjoy it. I want to like mention again, like when Zaldy was animating that whole running sequence, like how he's the most experienced animator to deal with the most difficult shot, and how he deal with it is very calm and well planned. Like he come scheduling like every day, spend a certain time for that, and then he'll try to reach to what he's planned to, and he did it, and he go home. And every time when I am able to visit him, it's like just it's also like he's uh giving his experience to me. Kind of, I enjoy that time. I just say, "Hey, Zaldi, how are you? How's your day?" And just chat. I don't need to do anything, but he still continue working and still share with me something, or he found some tips, or what's the thinking process of how he deal with this shot. Like it's very useful and helpful. So yeah, I enjoy those time, and I'm so happy Zaldi achieve that super difficult shot.
Well, the funny thing about that was the very first time I animated a clay character.
Yeah.
So I was relaying you information that I figured out the day before.
I mean, that's
Still learning, yeah.
yeah, but you did the legwork. It was like, I mean, I honestly feel like every phase of this film gave us a boost to like it was like making a stop motion film is probably one of the most difficult things I imagine anyone can do, even on the filmmaking side of things, because it's virtually every art form that has ever existed in the history of humanity represented in one medium, whether it's storytelling or sculpting or photography or lighting or painting, acting through your characters. There's anything that has existed in terms of storytelling and art exists in stop motion. So every time all of these things would happen, not only was it a boost to kind of like, oh wow, that looks great. That's now we have to keep elevating. But I think it was such a great learning process that, oh, that's how I can do that for this other project that I might be working on. So it's like it kind of gets the gears turning about how to move forward. Every little bit of knowledge, even in a community like this, is kind of it's gained knowledge for us all.
Yeah, definitely. And in fairness, I think in terms of like animation experience, especially with a clay character and Steve in general, I think coming into it, Nia and Fu actually had a bit more experience animating. Well, no, they had a lot more experience animating Steve than I did before I even started working on on that running sequence because they had already animated, like Fu already animated the end sequence with
Probably.
with Steve crawling towards the cookie box, and Nia had already animated or Fu animated the that end sequence, and then Nia had already animated the intro sequence where Steve's throwing the cookie up into his mouth. And I remember first seeing those shots, and it was really intimidating because it was like, oh my God, I have to match this animation with this treadmill run. It's like I can't take shortcuts with this treadmill run because then it wouldn't match Nia and Fu's animation. So I had to sort of take it sort of to that extra level in order to sort of get everything to sort of blend and match the quality together, because I didn't want my animation to sort of stick out like a sore thumb, you know what I mean? Especially bookended with Nia and Fu's really, really high quality animation. So they really set the tone in all fairness.
I think also, like, again, this project started kind of as a teaching tool. And in the world of stop motion, I think there's also a leeway, both being a teaching tool and then just in general how this type of production looks, that there is a little bit of give and take to the strict structure of a character. I mean, obviously, you look at this and Steve looks a little bit different throughout the film to a degree here and there. I mean, I animated that bathroom sequence, and Steve, I was trying to like follow the mirror at the end and seeing how Steve was designed standing up outside or laying in the tub. There were different parts that ended up designing Steve, which all contributed, and each of us did our own Steve take. Honestly, I have a whole thing of me rebuilding Steve again for just that bathroom sequence, and it's just kind of becomes more of an interpretation of like what is going to work enough to keep the story going, because the quaintness of something being handmade like clay animation there's people embrace it, ever since the beginning. You look at these Rankin Bass type of stop motion animations where there's just a suspension of disbelief because you appreciate the aesthetic so much. So I was really banking on the audience embracing that dynamic. And I know it's like, Zaldy, you kind of more, especially when you were getting your degree at the Academy of Art, where that's where I met you, you were pursuing computer animation, and then you kind of almost like, I don't want to speak for you, but you really embrace stop motion.
I did because it's tangible. In CG animation, you can do a lot more. You can achieve a level of quality that is incredibly highly polished. But the thing that was always frustrating to me with CG animation is that you can't physically touch the puppets that you are.
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
It doesn't exist, and it doesn't behave in the way that you want it to behave. It's like bending an arm is not as easy as reaching out and actually physically bending the arm of a character. So I feel like stop motion, you have a bit more control. Other thing, the biggest challenge is always gravity.
Right.
If it wasn't for gravity, it would be super easy.
It's like if we could build a stop motion studio in space, like a space station.
Yeah, there we go.
That would be such a great achievement for man, or mankind, or people kind, I should say.
When's that happening? When's the space colonies? When can we set one up in orbit?
Yeah, let's get in touch with SpaceX.
Right, there we go.
But so yeah, like it was your first experience with using clay and more of a tangible source because you again came from a CG background. But in terms of you guys, I met all of you guys while I was running that department, and I think Fu and Nia. It's like Zaldy. I ended up meeting you because there was a spring show showcasing the works of former stop motion students, and that's where I learned of your stuff. Honestly, I think your stuff is still there.
Yeah.
All of your stuff is probably,
Forever.
yeah. You guys got to get your stuff back. I don't know what is going on during COVID over there, but definitely make sure you don't leave your stuff behind. But I would Zaldy's stuff was beautiful, the puppets and everything like that, and then I was there more for the production of both Nia and Foo's films. Foo's Telltale and Nia's Goodnight, Mr. Sandman, and even Zaldy's film Merlin Jones. Definitely, I was happy to feature those in our festival. But in terms of using different forms of animation or different styles and being more tactile and getting in there, I feel like the polished look that Zaldy had that he applied to this film also married itself well to the multi media look of Foo's film, and also the very kind of quaint, stylized look of Nia's film. Um, Talk a little bit about your experiences with your own films and how that might have informed uh, the project that we ended up working on.
I think for me, I mean, experiences when I did Merlin Jones, I really wanted to play around with, like you said, I was studying CG animation, but I wanted to marry the two worlds. I appreciate what companies like Leica are doing. I mean, I know they're highly criticized for their for their stop motion films looking too CG, because they blur the line, because they utilize a whole lot of CG and 3D printing and CG visual effects, that their films start to sort of remove themselves from that stop motion look. But I really wanted to sort of embrace. I love the digital end because it's not as messy. You don't get clay on your hands. I don't like it because it's not tangible. I like stop motion because it's tangible, but there's challenges. So I wanted to marry the two. Um, and with Merlin Jones, I used a lot of 3D printed facial pieces for my puppets' facial expressions, and I wanted to take that mentality into the production of into the cookie cutter. I used a lot of 3D printed parts and props. The rig that I designed for Steve, I designed that in CG before committing to actually constructing it out of wood. Even the rig for, or the armature for Steve, I sketched that out in 3D before I actually committed doing it in in foam and wire. So that's the mentality I came in with, because those are the tools that I'm familiar with, and mostly because sometimes I'm lazy and don't want to sketch things out on paper and would rather just plop it up on a computer and be able to spin it around and see it before committing physically to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fu, you use so many different techniques for your film. You used laser cut out replacement animation. You had sets. You used 2D animation, right? What other type of things did you use for Telltale?
I also paint on glasses.
That's
Yeah,
right.
use
Oh yeah.
blurs and
I did too.
paint. Yeah, or charcoal, just draw on the paper, but like smash it and draw the next one. So most most of my set or those animated frame, they just disappear. Like I didn't left anything. I think I just have the cutout figures and the tree and the puppet, and other things are all gone.
Yeah.
They just exist in that film only. Yeah, and I am like when doing the thesis film, before I do the researching, I am very inspired by like the MoStopMo you mentioned before. I super like how they do multimedia and do a lot of experiment, and also like open a portal or sound studio from the UK. So because the story, the character, while he is growing, he need to transform. So it's a nice chance for me to also to touch everything I can, to change different material and to try how to animate those. So it's a fun journey to play with. And about MoStopMo, this production. I think I remember Nia and I first watched Zaldy's The Merlin. That film was during spring show, and when we watched it, I was thinking, what? We have this film here? Why did I never meet Zaldy before? Like, come
Yeah.
on, this is super aiming for like all the replacement. It's aiming for Leica for sure. Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
Why didn't I see him before? But
Right.
when I see the name, yeah, Zaldy is about to make when that time was called Steve's Kidney. So I said, oh, come on, I really need to meet this guy. I am very excited. And I haven't really touched clay much. Nia and I have made a music video, which is by clay, but I feel it will be even more nicer as a collaborative project. I can challenge the clay again. Yeah, and very thankful. Like during the journey, wow, I can still continue to do something with After Effects with different, more graphic look things. So yeah, it's really fun and worth it.
I didn't realize that you and Nia worked on a clay music video. I'd love to see that.
Us project.
It's our first thing together, right? Like
Introduction to.
yeah.
How can I get to see that? Is it available online somewhere?
Yeah, it's still available. I
Okay,
think
so can we include the link in the description of this podcast so people can check it out?
sure. We even send the email to the band because to tell them that we use a part of their music, and yeah, they even replied. So it was super excited and fun.
That's cool. And so then Nia, so like I said, I discovered Zaldy, and you guys were both working towards your graduate degree,
Uh-huh.
and that's where this community started building. And like you said, like I think the one of the issues that MoStopMo is definitely trying to do is connect people who have a common passion for animation, whether it be editing or whether it be animating or compositing. And that's what ended up starting building. But you guys were right in front of me. Zaldy, I had to do a little bit of digging. And thankfully, once we got our name out there, Jordan came to us. So when you, Nia, you were working on your film, you did a different type of character design for your characters. It was kind of more of a hardened, epoxied character, and then you did. Was it punched wool for the character of the Sandman?
Needle felting.
Felting. You did needle felting for the
Yeah.
Sandman character. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So tell me a little bit about your process.
I think it was a mess in the beginning. I didn't know because I was I was really stressed out because I didn't came out with a good story. So I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. The time is never stopping. So I feel like I need to build something as I was writing the story. So it was a really organic process. I think I just go along with where it takes me.
I remember hearing your frustration at a certain point. You're like, oh my gosh, my characters are messy and blah, blah, blah. And I hear so much about how people love your style and the characters of that film. And I mean, it did so well for itself. It became an opening short for the Drunken Film Festival. Was that 2019?
Yeah.
So you got to your film got to play right before the preview to Mad God, where Phil Tippett was in attendance.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I feel like Nia's very humble, and she is always like, "Oh, it's kind of messy. I don't know if I like this." And it's like everyone else loves her stuff. And it's like sometimes Nia's just kind of like, I don't know. And it's just like I love your style for your characters. Your illustration style is great, and there's such a humor in it. Like one of the things I'm just going to point out for this cookie box, we went back and forth talking about how to just design the cookie box and trying to get something that would read visually. But then you decided to create all these cute little elements on it. Like, I mean, outside of just the back of this box where Steve, I was like, you tied in the whole story with Rory going down the hill in the wagon. Or one of my favorite things is, let me see, can we see that? The little marching people.
They're playing cookie instrument.
I mean, these little details that you have, and then at a certain point, I think I asked for some milk and cookies, and I changed it a little bit to kind of show a collaborative environment. But these are like the little things that you were creating, and you created each one of these little patches.
Mm.
Like this one, I really love. If you get a chance to look at it, for the character design patch, literally somebody holding not only a Steve character, but the tie downs on Steve's feet are there. I mean, it's just like you're giving not only like you're not only creating an illustration, but you're giving even more credit to people's intelligence level because that's an inside thing that people will be like, what are those things coming out of his feet if they didn't know stop motion animation where you needed to tie down the character?
Oh.
So it's like you have this beautiful attention to detail and also like an intelligence behind your design that is rewarding for the viewer.
I gotta say, just commenting on Nia's style,
Yeah.
especially on her short film, on Goodnight, Mr. Sandman, you could immediately tell that it was an illustrator that animated the film.
Mm.
And the easiest way to tell is how she is able to convey emotion of her character, especially the Sandman, convey the emotion of the Sandman just with his eyes. Like his face is covered, but you could tell his emotion just with his eyes, and that is impressive.
Yeah.
Thank you,
That is
guys.
impressive.
You make me feel think more of myself now. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, go ahead. Go ahead. You were
I
going to say
think
something?
most of it, I think you are over analyzing me. I don't know, because most of the time it's just me not knowing what to do next, and I just got carried away doing that one thing that I'm working on. So like the illustrating the patch that detailed is just me not
But
knowing what.
I think the point we're trying to make is sure we're all in those situations where we're just thinking I'm just going to do the next thing, but what we're saying is you're doing it in a style that is so uniquely you, and you bring to it such a different perspective that no one else is bringing to it, whether it's the style, the humor, the intelligence. And that's the part that's fascinating to us, that you have this ability that is unique to you that reads so well. So,
Agreed.
yeah. And I mean, and that goes across the board. Like, again, kind of just going back to how we all met. Jordan, were you working on any type of thesis project or anything? I know you were getting your undergraduate degree. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was working on my undergraduate degree.
And you graduated when?
I graduated last May.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And that was like a COVID graduation, right?
Oh, it was interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Because at a certain point you were, I mean, classes just ended probably, I think it was like around before spring break, right?
No, classes continued all the way out till May 21st.
But I mean in person.
In person, yes. They stopped in March, middle of March, I believe. We were not allowed to go to the physical classrooms anymore.
Uh-huh.
That was interesting, for sure.
So what were you working on towards your graduation? Was there a final project or a thesis? Or I know I mean, we kept you pretty busy on your own, right? But I was also kind of like, trying to give some leeway, but being like, no, you're ours, work for us.
No, I graduated with a degree of 3D animation and visual effects, which is a little odd because I am going into the career field for video editing for animation. So I was not required of any thesis film. Usually that is required for graduate students,
Right.
but it isn't pushed upon the undergraduates as much.
Okay. So this kind of was your thesis film.
In a way, yes. I was working on 2 other projects at the time, but this is the one that I feel like is one of the first projects I've actually completed.
Okay.
My other projects were either unfortunately let go. I had one where a director, he didn't have any interest anymore. And leading a project without the director, without the creative head, you can't do it because you don't know where you're going with it. So yeah, this is one of my first films that has really taken my full attention for it, and I've seen to the end of it, which is fantastic to see it done. It's wonderful.
I'm gonna remember that when you are in the industry and famous
Oh.
and doing so many projects. Like, remember who was part of your first film, Jordan? Uh,
I will. I'll remember this, especially because I feel like a lot of people can't say that they've done a stop motion animation film like this. I feel like our
or
little
just a
team
stop motion
is,
animation film at all.
yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like our little team here can proudly put that star up on their chest and be like, I did this and it's done. It's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's kind of talk about now that it's out there.
Mhm.
What is it? What do we think? Where are we going with this, guys?
I don't know.
I know like the Fu and Nia have an experience on the festival circuit with their films. They've gotten laurels from festivals around the world, right?
Mm. Oh, I know.
I know.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, outside of putting together this documentary, putting together this podcast, possibly doing a gallery show like Zaldi had mentioned, I'm also thinking about making it a virtual gallery show. You know, like kind of like you could tour real estate and zoom in and different things, and then like little drop downs come.
Oh, you know what'd be cool is those like 360 like virtual tour things. That'd be so cool.
We have all the props, we have all the sets, I have the
Mhm.
space, and if it's just a matter of getting in there and figuring out the user interface, that would
Yeah.
definitely be like something in terms of the film because I this started as a teaching tool
Mhm.
and it's continued to be a teaching tool. I've been able to speak about this film in Guadalajara, in Minneapolis. I've taught kids little parts of it in San Francisco. Um, it's a great tool that uh, can still, like, you know, people could come in and check in on this and see hopefully some of this information that we're sharing with people is useful to them in understanding the process of a clay animated stop motion film. uh, but I guess going forward, what is the idea? Like, where do we think? What is our desire for the next step for you guys? And I'll let anyone kind of field if they're working on something, or if you know you're talking about this or something else. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, prior to COVID, what I really wanted to see out of this film is just exposure.
Yeah.
You know, being able to get our name out there, being able to get meet contacts,
Mhm.
um, that sort of thing. Get leads. I think being able to shop this film around to the festival circuit, and hopefully it's received well. If it's received as well as it has been through our own festival, I think that'll go a long way with getting our name out there, and hopefully, you know, because in this industry, your name is everything. Your
Yeah.
reputation is
Yes, it is.
is everything, and to be able to build a reputation so that we could, you know, land more projects would be ideal.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts?
Uh, I hope this can at least share with more Taiwanese audience. I know there are some festivals which are free to submit and very well hold. There are some in Taiwan and they are looking for animation. So you can submit to those.
I mean, I definitely want to pick your brains in terms of submitting because it seems like Fu and Nia, you both have been able to make some real get your films really out there worldwide. So that's yeah. That the next phase is kind of shopping this little film around,
Mhm.
like Zaldi said, and really getting our names out there and really kind of showing that this was the little project that could and did.
Mhm.
despite the obstacles like switching studios, um,
COVID.
COVID, learning the learning curve of going online for I mean, again, you guys weren't a part of the whole idea of the festival and, a gallery show. That was kind of more my doing because I've had experience running festivals in Chicago. Um, but being able to kind of embrace that idea and like possibly doing a gallery show or, you know, future festivals even, like trying to understand the festival world was kind of a part of this teaching tool as well. um, yeah, like going forward with this, I'm interested in it. And I don't know if I was telling Zaldi before I got on the before you all got on the phone or on the Zoom, is that I just obtained an RV.
Hmm.
And what I'm going to be doing is a 48 state tour of the United States. And along the way, I'm going to be creating a little bit of a blog and documentary of the stop motion opportunities throughout the United States.
Wow.
So
Start
that's
from when?
starting when? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
The plan is to start it around April. So one of the projects that I've been talking to you guys with is called Monkey and Car that has been in development for many, many years with two of our jurors from the MoStopMo Festival, Mike and Wendy Owens.
Mhm.
So I've talked with them, and I'm actually going to be going to Minnesota, making sure I'm COVID free, quarantining, and then I'm going to be bringing a lot of stop motion equipment from Oakland to Minneapolis to set up a studio to really start developing Monkey and Car. So that's going to be a part of this bigger trip. But the idea is starting in April and throughout the summer, maybe through maybe August, I'm going to be doing a 48 state tour and kind of like looking into festivals, looking into job opportunities, looking into communities where people are, you know, producers or editors or designers that are all lending their skills towards the stop motion community, looking at educational institutions even and checking out their programs, seeing what's out there because I feel like uh, we have the possibility of connecting more of us once we just make those relations. Like, just going to New York and meeting somebody who ended up coming to a MoStopMo meeting. Uh, that those little connections are big, and I would love it to be international. Love to kind of get the word out in Taiwan or anywhere, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. I just wondering because the COVID is still there, like the festival things. It since if it still continue like virtual, like
Yep.
for a while, even next year, you think?
Who knows?
I don't know. Yeah, so if those festival already decide to be virtual, so what's the difference like we submit to festival or we just highly broadcast on our social media? It's just a question like
I think it's all about the reach of the festival. So if we submit to a festival that's popular worldwide, like Sundance, you have an international community and it's a well-established festival. Um, there's the Children's International Film Festival. There's Terry Ibell, who won a bunch of accolades at the Montreal Stop Motion Festival. That was a virtual festival, but he was able to get his idea in front of people like at Netflix. So I think there still is a lot of merit into putting our stuff into festivals because our audience, we're still a growing entity. We don't have, I mean, right at the time of our fest, we had just gotten over 300 followers on Instagram. We belong to some groups that we have a reach of around 10,000 people on Facebook. But all that being said and done, I'm talking to Kickstarter people and other marketing and producing people to see how we can grow this community because I think we're in a new territory. This is all unnavigated, but I think it can be used in our in our favor. like my notion of going cross country, I don't know how much in person, handshaking and stuff like that I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to, be in that area and see if I could get tours that are socially distanced, and we can, and maybe, I mean, who knows, maybe we might have a vaccine by then. Yeah. Um,
It's fun.
yeah. So, I mean, this is probably as good a time as any to wrap up this conversation. Um, you guys, I'm really happy to have met all of you. I'm so excited to have worked on this project with you guys. It's been really like a gift that you guys came towards, we came towards each other, I should say, and we all worked together and we stuck with it. It's been my experience, especially we all met in an art school environment, and there's a lot of big ideas, but it's harder to find people who are going to follow through with those ideas to the end.
Right.
And I got to give you guys credit for sticking with this, um, putting your own sweat equity into it, financial equity into this. Time is a commodity that we can never replace. Once it's spent, it's spent. And that you spent that time working on this project and the project becoming a bigger entity than the film itself, and you stuck with it. I don't know how to express my thanks to you guys in any proper way. It's like you guys are wonderful. Your dispositions are amazing, and your flexibility and your understanding aligned with the dedication you guys showed to this film. It's just that I have no doubt that your trajectory is going to be embraced. It's like anyone among this team, I would highly recommend to be working in the storytelling world. So I got to thank you guys. You guys are all wonderful.
And thank you for keeping the production alive.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
for
thank
pushing
you.
us more to do more than we know we could.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Oh yes. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you had something to say, Fu, or no?
Yeah, but you can go first.
I just talked a bunch. Go ahead.
No, I just suddenly think of some little things like why we can keep doing it and to put it out. It's like I was surprised that Jordan was just graduated from undergraduate, because when she stepped into the 347 that studio, she's like totally professional. How she talk, how she deal with it, like you can rely on her. That's my first impression. Like, oh my god, we got an editor, which is
Yeah.
so good. Like I don't know that she's undergraduate.
Yeah.
She's super experienced. Yeah, she's very
Thank
mature
you.
and yeah. So it's like not only Jordan but also the people come into this team. They are all super exist to what I imagine I want to collaborate with. So that's one of the good thing. And also like about David, always have a very once in a while we'll have some crazy idea coming out, and or something he wants to push more or further, and or we need to polish it better and better. Like he's asking to be more perfect for the industry standard. Like he's not only teaching, but he's also like pushing us to the limit. But I think a lot of time I decide I want, like I believe in him, and okay, I decide to do more time into this is because David has spent a lot of days in MoStopMo studio, in the Oakland studio. He's been sleeping in that studio himself, and he puts so many resources, so many times, so many energy. Like he's in it. So the like so does Zaldy. So like we see an example. Everyone had an example for them. So it's just pushing us to more get involved in this and just to dedicate to each other.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, even like, I think about the production, and, there were people who started with us and then couldn't go further for one reason or another, whether it was time conflict or class loads, or even just
Oh,
They
they
hired
Want-
those.
or they just didn't want to. Maybe they were just like, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be." You know?
Well, like Matthew left for Leica, so it was like
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a bittersweet situation because he had helped us put together some initial props for the bathroom and in the living room. He was there to do that, and then he went to Leica. And to be honest, I don't know where he is right now. He'd be a good person to follow up with,
right.
see how he's doing. I know, like you were in touch with him because you took classes with him, right, Zaldy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so got to follow up with Matthew and see how he's doing. But yeah, the people, like I said, in an art school environment, one of the biggest asset of an art school, in my opinion, is the community you can build and the friendships you can forge. You'll be able to find other people who can do things, but the other, like the bad part about that is like people actually following through with what they say they were going to do. And again, people left the project, but you guys sticking with this project and believing in it and believing in what eventually became MoStopMo. I mean, you guys are MoStopMo. You guys helped make what this is. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So with that, guys, I want to thank you all for joining. I hope we got some other plans down the road. Hopefully, things with a budget. I'm very hopeful for the future of this of MoStopMo and our relationships. I'm sure this is like some of the longest lasting friendships and artistic relationships I forged were at my art school at Columbia in Chicago. And I anticipate that we're going to be in touch and we're going to be working together again on a project sometime in the near future.
Oh, you could expect me bugging you.
Please do. And it's like I said, I've been kind of dangling this carrot for a long time with everybody about Monkey and Car. And like I said, I'm going to be going to Minnesota. We're going to develop some proofs of concept. We're talking about I'm dedicated to really making that my next focus. So I'm glad to have you guys as all a part of my team if you're willing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks once again. And until I see you guys in person, we'll be in touch. But in the meantime, I'm just going to say, see you later, animators.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.